Well, hello again to our welcome to our reading of Acts of the Apostles, and we're in chapter 18, and we're up to verse 18. So Paul has spent a year and 6 months in Corinth, and of course he's going to write numerous letters to them, of which we have two. Possibly the two we have, maybe some, at least one of them might be a combination of letters. The first letter that Paul wrote to the Corinthians, which hasn't survived. So he certainly set up a congregation there and he took interest in it, but he now decides to move on. So Apollos and Paul, prosmenas, aorist participle from prosmeno, so having remained literally still, hikanos hemeras. Hikanos is used, it normally means sufficient, but in Luke he uses it in the sense of many. So he remained further many days, apotaxamenos, then having taken leave, with the brethren, so he remained many days with the brethren. So after he'd done that, apotaxamenos, having taken leave, this is a New Testament usage of the word. It's from apotasso. It sort of means finishing up your business. So having taken leave of, it appears again in verse 21, and it's also in Mark and Luke. Ex eple, from ekpleo, he sailed out into Syria, and along with him were Priscilla and Aquila. Interestingly, he puts the wife first and the husband second, which is very typical of Luke, who regards women as being extremely important in the early church, which they were, and always shows due respect. Keramenos, now this is an interesting word here, having shaved his, this is from Cairo, having sheared himself, it's middle, so having cut off his hair, presumably in Kenkrii, there's Tain Kephalain. So having shorn his head in Kenkrii, for he had a Ukraine, he made a vow. And I think from memory, Kenkrii is the port of Corinth. So it's a nearby Corinthian port. Kat antasan de eis Epheson, and he went down into, or rather they went down, it's plural, so they came they came into Ephesus, and he left Ekanus, that is the others. Now this autu here is this locative use of autu, it means there. It's not of him, it's in that very place, so there. So he left them there, and he himself, having gone into the synagogue, he debated with the Jews. Erotonton de auton, and them having asked him, main I to remain for greater time. So they asked him to stay for a greater time. Uk epinusen, he did not agree. Epinuo is to nod, and to nod in disagreement. So he did, to nod in agreement. So he did not agree. But, and there's this apotaxamenos again. But having departed, having taken leave, and having said, palin apocampso, this is anacampso, from anacampto. Campto is to bend, so I will bend again. In other words, I'll come to you on a return visit. So I will come back to you on a return visit, and then we get, like the Arabic inshallah, we get to theou thelontes, God willing, genitive absolute. Anakthe, this is from anago, this verb. This is the aorist passive. It's from anago. And it's used for getting on board a ship. So he set out by ship from Ephesus. And having gone into Caesarea, and having anabas, from anabino, having got on board, another word for getting on a ship, kai spasaminos, and having greeted the church, he went down into Antioch. So this is where the second journey, Paul's second missionary journey, ends. The succession of participles we've seen gives an expression of haste, but in fact it's quite a long journey. It's been estimated as about 1,500 miles compressed into a couple of verses. And literally having made a certain time, so having perhaps spent a certain time, he went out, diakomenos, going through kathexes in turn, the land, the country of Galatia, the Galatic land, the land of Galatia and Phrygia, episterisdon pantas tous methetas, strengthening all the disciples. Idaios de tis Apollos onomati. Now this is the first mention in Acts of this very interesting character that we know very, very, very little about, unfortunately, which is Apollos. He gets mentioned in Romans and elsewhere, but we don't know much about him except that he's from Alexandria. So there was a certain Jewish man by name Apollos. Note it's a Greek name. Alexandrius to Gene, an Alexandrian by birth, a man logios. So a logios is someone who is eloquent or learned, probably contains what we would call a man of culture. It was suggested by Martin Luther that it was this Apollos, in fact, who wrote the epistle to the Hebrews, but this, of course, is just speculative. But he's an interesting character, and I wish we knew more about him. So he went down to Ephesus, literally being mighty in the scriptures. This use of dunatos en is only in Luke in the New Testament. It's quite common in the Septuagint, this particular use of en, or dunatos en, being mighty in. So being powerful, so knowing a lot about the scriptures. Hutos ein kat ekemenos. Now kat akio is the verb here, and this is the this is the participle, passive participle. So, and this is the periphrastic use here. So he was instructed. It's related to the verb akio, I call, and I give oral instruction to. We get our word echo is connected with this one. But anyway, he was instructed in tein hodon to kuriou, in the way of the Lord. And Luke may be using this word here in the sense that he has some knowledge of the Christian faith, but it's very partial and selective. Kai zeon, boiling, literally. Zeo is literally to boil. So he's fervent in spirit. So he was, being fervent in his spirit, he was speaking and teaching akribos, well, accurately, the things regarding Jesus, but knowing only the baptism of John. He began parasiazesthai en te synagogue, he began to speak boldly in the synagogue. And Priscilla and Aquila, notice she comes first, Priscilla and Aquila, having heard him, pros elabonto, they grabbed hold of him, they took him aside perhaps, and ex ethento, interesting use of the word here, they laid out for him more accurately the way of, well, 10 hodon and then square brackets of God. Remember, Christianity was, in its early days, was referred to as the hodos, so this may be a use of it here. So they laid out for him more accurately or more clearly the way of God, or perhaps just the way. Again, this is a very mysterious passage here. It may be, there were many different versions of Christianity in its early times. It was Pauline Christianity that eventually prevailed, and he may have had a slightly different understanding of Christianity, and they're giving him the Pauline version. Anyway, Bulomenu de autu, him wishing, so when he wanted Dielthane to pass through into Achaia, that is into Greece, pro trepsaminoi, this is from pro trepamai, to encourage. So the brothers, having encouraged him, egrapson, they wrote to the disciples apodexasthai auton, to receive him. And he, paraginominos, when he was present, sun ebaleto, this is the aorist middle, is the sum balamai, to assist. So he assisted polu muchly or greatly, those, and it takes a dative, those having believed, dative perfect participle, dative plural, those having believed, dietes caritas, through grace. Eutonos, and that goes with, this is an adverb, it's going with the dia kat elenketo, to refute. So this verb again is only here in all of Greek literature, and it may be probably a combination of dialenko, to confute, and katelenko, to convict. And so the eutonos is mightily, so he mightily refuted the Jews, daimosia, publicly, showing through the scriptures that Jesus to be the Messiah. This eutonos again is very rare, fairly rare. It's only here and in Luke 23:10 in the New Testament, but it does occur in the Septuagint. It generally translated as mightily. So mightily he refuted the Jews, publicly showing through the scriptures Jesus to be the Messiah. And that's the end of chapter 18.